Blaring horns, impassable streets and distressed citizens. All of this is the work of a movement that calls itself the Freedom Convoy. Truck drivers are demanding an end to the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. The protest has disrupted major Canadian cities, clogging all the key US-Canada border crossings. How exactly did these protests start? The vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers were imposed in January, both by Canada and the United States. This is when the so-called Freedom Convoy was organized. Truck drivers traveled across Canada to Ottawa. They then parked themselves downtown in a show of solidarity. The demonstrations have left the Canadian capital paralyzed. Downtown Ottawa is home to the Canadian Parliament, the Central Bank and the Prime Minister's office. It has been largely under lockdown after truckers occupied the streets. So what impact are these protests having? There are two major border blockades, one in Ontario and one in Alberta. They are disrupting hundreds of millions of dollars in Canada-US trade. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has refused to meet with the protest organizers while clashing with opposition lawmakers over the restrictions.
You cannot stop a pandemic with blockades. You cannot end a pandemic by decree. You can't end a pandemic by legislation. You need to end a pandemic by relying on science, by public health measures, and by vaccinations. That's exactly what we have focused on through these past 2 years.
So what exactly are the authorities doing about the protests? Canadian authorities are scrambling to end the Ottawa occupation. They are using a combination of criminal charges, traffic tickets, and the prospect of losing access to fuel. They hope that more and more arrests will end the blockades. A court granted an interim injunction this week preventing people from sounding horns in downtown Ottawa. For starters, it is almost impossible to remove the trucks from downtown without the cooperation of the drivers themselves. Over 500 heavy trucks remain in the so-called red zone, and reports suggest that the city is struggling to find willing towing companies. Let's talk about what the Canadians think about the protests. A recent poll has found that 62% of Canadians surveyed oppose the Freedom Convoy. Currently, nearly 80% of Canada's eligible population is fully vaccinated. A recent poll also showed that a majority of Canadians favoured imposing more restrictions on those unvaccinated. For now, there seems to be no end in sight to the protests in Ottawa. The Canadian capital, though, is no stranger to demonstrations. This one has been going on for days now. It's not just Canada that is worried. Demonstrations could soon affect the United States. The White House has expressed concern about the impact of these demonstrations on the American economy. Washington says it is working with the authorities across the border to reroute the traffic.
The blockade poses a risk to supply chains for the auto industry because the bridge is a key conduit for motor vehicles, components and parts, and delays risk disrupting auto production.
For further insights, let's get in our esteemed panelist on the broadcast. Ivan Kachanovsky, who is a political scientist at the University of Ottawa, is with us. Thanks very much for being here with us on WION World is One. As the protests continue, it's almost impossible to remove these trucks from downtown without the cooperation of the drivers themselves. If you can start by giving us a better sense of the situation on the ground.
Thank you for the invitation. I actually live in downtown Ottawa and witness myself this protest every day. And this is actually a major event because typically Ottawa is very quiet and it has a reputation of being a very quiet town. Even so, this is a city with more than 1 million people population, and this is a capital city of Canada. And this protest actually brought major disruption to downtown Ottawa, and it is actually a major political event in Canada right now. And this protest started when there were a large number of vehicles, large trucks arrived in Ottawa from different areas of Canada, in order to protest vaccination policies and which were adopted by the Canadian government, but this actually protest is still ongoing. I can still see that the main roads which lead to the parliament are blocked, and there are still many businesses which are closed, and the protest is continue. And it's possible to see many people with Canadian flags who are actually protesting in support of this protest. They are still in the downtown Ottawa, and they not only stay in near the parliament, but they also walk the streets because it's quite cold in Ottawa.
Right. The Prime Minister has refused to meet with the protest organizers. What do you make of that move?
I think this is a political decision because Liberal Party supports current policies of the minority government led by Prime Minister Trudeau, and this decision actually was expressed by the Prime Minister of Canada in his interviews. He refused to meet with protesters because he said that they are supporting extremist policies and oppose vaccination policies which are supported by science. And according to public opinion polls, majority of Liberal Party supporters actually oppose this protest. And there is support from Conservative Party supporters for the protest, and there is also political division in Canada because of this protest taking place right now.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.